In this presentation, I want to summarize Brigitta Hauser-Schaublin's chapter entitled Blood, Cultural Effectiveness of Biological Conditions. She starts the chapter by asking, what sense do people in New Guinea make of blood? So we could say, what is the symbolic significance of blood for people in New Guinea? She wants to contrast her argument with that of other authors, such as famously Strathern or Rosaldo, who look at blood as being related to social organisation and social structure only. She says it relates actually to biological facts. And that's not such an important part of my point, of my need to summarise this chapter, but anyway, that's her argument. She talks about the various characteristics of blood. We all bleed, and if we bleed too much, we die. That blood thickens and forms a scab. If we lack blood, we become faint and we can collapse. If we bleed out of an orifice, like our nose or our ears or our eyes, it's a sign we might be ill. Menstruation, when a young girl starts to menstruate, it's a sign that she's biologically mature. Menstruation, bleeding through the vagina, occurs regularly. Menstruation ceases when a woman becomes pregnant. We are all connected to our mothers through an umbilical cord which connects blood. Flow of blood accompanies delivery of babies, and the navel or the belly button is a lifelong mark that every human being has. And because blood is associated with menstruating and pregnancy so strongly, it tends to be associated with women, Hauser-Schaublin argues. Put another way, blood performs itself more clearly in women than in men. In this sense, blood reinforces the genital differences between males and females. It demonstrates not only a complementarity between the genders, as the sexual organs of men and women correspondingly do, but also a physiological asymmetry which no society has surpassed completely, although they emphasize these differences in their perception and in interpretation in varying degrees. That quote from page 84-85. And the final characteristic she points about blood is that it's hard to distinguish if I get a vial of blood, for example, is that animal blood or human blood, and is it male blood or female blood? Just if we look at a vial of blood, for example. Now she says all societies are forced to acknowledge a role for women in childbirth. What that means is in some particularly patriarchal societies, the role of men is emphasized to a huge degree, and in spite of that, all societies, including the patriarchal societies, have to concede some role for women. She notes that in New Guinea, on the island of New Guinea in general, men and women are considered equally important in theories of procreation. A theory of procreation is basically the idea of how babies are made. Some cultures have a physiological idea which is similar to the Western scientific idea that you need semen and you need some sort of substance like eggs or whatever that women provide. Additionally, there's another aspect, like in the West, if a couple are infertile, it's understood that it's a matter of semen and eggs, but why, for example, the man might have infertile semen or the woman might not have eggs, that's normally associated with bad luck or a coincidence. In other societies, there are other ways to explain why procreation does work and doesn't work aside from luck, and it can be God, it can be witchcraft, magic, all kinds of things. Okay, so so if we think about it in that symbolic at that symbolic level, like why aside from what the so-called Western scientific idea, why, for example, some people are fertile or infertile. Well, as far as fertility, the idea is on a symbolic level, women provide the blood and men provide the semen. And out of the blood and the semen, you get a baby. Women have more blood, and this excess of blood is what is used to form the baby. The blood from the women creates the soft parts of the body, like, lungs, cheeks, and so on. Whereas the semen creates the hard parts of the body, teeth, nails, and bones. There are some variations, but that's the general picture in the societies of New Guinea. Now, Hauser-Schaublin moves on in the next section, which is entitled Matrifiliation versus Patrilineal Descent, or finiteness versus perpetuity. She now goes on to discuss the Bimin Kuskusmin, which is a group that often comes up in anthropological discussions. They're one of the more famous groups, like the Trobrians, or like the Navajo, or like the Kwakiutl, or like the Javanese. They come up all the time. For the Bimin Kuskusmin, there are two kinds of blood. There's menstrual blood, which is black, and agnatic, or male relative blood, which is red. Now, agnatic blood, let me quote from page 87, closely linked to the agnatic blood are the phenaic spirits, which are transmitted through semen. They manifest patrilineal continuity and link past, present, and future generations through males exclusively. Patriclans, ritual moieties, and initiation age groups are reckoned in terms of shared phenaic spirits. So in other words, the male blood, this agnatic red blood, is associated with these spirits, with the patriclans or patrilineal clans. So men, in procreation, men create the hard, durable forms like bones, and women create the soft, perishable forms like flesh. So we have a sense here of perpetuity. What males create is something that lasts through the ages. It lasts down through your descendants, but it's also the strong parts of the body like bones and teeth. And part of this idea, so my bones as let's say a Bimin Kuskusmin man, they are my father's bones and my grandfather's bones. And we keep the skull of our ancestor, the male ancestor that is the founder of our clan. And that skull marks us as a group and marks our territory. That perpetual agnatic blood that created that skull still creates my bones and will create my son's bones too. So he will also be part of this patrilineal clan. She talks amongst the Bimin Kuskusmin about another kind of spirit. We've talked about the phenaic spirit. The other kind of spirit is Ka'ap Habuurian. Ka'ap Habuurian spirits. And these are associated with the black blood of women. And these evil spirits gain strength or feed on menstrual blood. I guess what analogy that springs to mind for me is when the idea of cancers feeding off blood. That cancers feed off blood. So these are like these Habuurian spirits feed off blood, but a special kind of blood which is menstrual blood. Now, she then talks about the Arbella, who make a similar distinction. The male spirit creates bone and turns into a star after death. The female spirit is in blood and disappears into the earth after death. So again, the male, masculine, patrilineal side continues in perpetuity. The female side is closed off, just gets passed down. Not much gets passed down to the children at all. A woman dies and just goes into the earth and disappears, whereas the man continues through the bones of his descendants and as a spirit in the sky. She finishes off the section around page 88-89 by saying that all this stuff that she's explained, all this data she's explained, probably comes from anthropologists talking to men in New Guinea. And she suggests that women might give a very different account of procreation and of childbirth. So we'll leave it at that. No, I'm going to continue in just one more section. She then talks about the Melpa. For it's the men pass on grease and women pass on blood, and there's only one possibility of becoming a clan member, and that's through one's father's grease, the grease or semen. I think the grease is actually in the semen. To quote her from page 89, thus descent dogmas posit that clansmen share their grease or semen of an original male ancestor. So if I'm a Melpa, my semen has the grease of my father's father, his father, etc., etc., all the way back to our male ancestor that formed our clan. And I will pass that on to my child. Alright, so that's only up to page 89 of Brigitta Hauser-Schaublin, and it gives an interesting idea of blood, which we can contrast with other cultures such as European and Bedouin, as described by Abu Lugod in Veiled Sentiments.